A soul cake, please, good Mrs. A soul cake. A apple, a pear, a plum, a cherry, any good thing to make us all merry. Good evening, good traveller, and thank you for the pint. You're a folklorist, you say. I don't know what one of them be. You want to know about soul cakes? Well, that there song, that's just treats for children to beg from people on Souls Night. Not like Nana Alice's soul cakes. Oh, nothing sweet in them. Nana Alice? Well, she was witch in these parts when I was but an orphan nipper. No doctors in those days, nor lawyers, nor priests. Body, soul, and judgment, they were the jurisdiction of the witch and Barnabas, the sin eater. You not know of sin eaters? Oh, they used to shrive the dead in these parts. I was apprenticed to Barnabas, not as a soul eater, no cash in that business, but he was toy maker. Not that he sold much in these parts. You'd have to be a brave child to go and bother Barnabas for a toy. But most of his stuff was carted down to the town by Ned the carter. The only man in the whole of the hills that didn't cheat was our Barnabas. Don't want to upset the soul eater. Anyway, Nana Alice's soul cakes was flour for the body, wine for the blood, and salt to preserve the thoughts, and a little extra, a little something from the departed, a lock of hair, scrape of skin, drop of blood, the soul of the departed, all went into that soul cake. Anyways, once it was baked, that soul cake would be put by the boundary, and Barnabas would come along and eat the soul cake and take away the sins of the departed so they could pass on pure. You shakes your head. You confused about things, are you? Well, I'll tell you a story. Story of little Jenny Carter. We was friends, Jenny Carter and I. Oh, we must have been about 8. And Nana and Barnabas was old even at that time. People said that there were trees in the woods that were older than Barnabas and Alice, but they were rare to find. Well, it was a cold frost, tree split in winter when Alice fell ill. Well, I was huddled in the barn outside. I didn't go near the house because Ned was a bit free with his fists when I was around. And Meg, she sent for me. She's told, go and fetch Alice. Go and fetch Nana Alice. Well, I knew it was bad then. We didn't fetch Nana Alice for nothing. And Ned, he gave Meg a thump for that. He didn't want no old woman meddling in his house. Not that he was there that often. When he was home, he was down the pub more than he was at home. The rest of the time, he was down traiting his cart all over the country. Well, Nana Alice, she come up. She's silent and hard as the frost. And she lifts the blanket off that sweating Jenny. Oh, you step back a bit. Because there on Jenny's chest was a rag doll. And you could see the fleas crawling across that doll. Nana Alice, he just took up the fire tongs, picked up the doll real gentle like, and thrust it into the fire. Well, Ned, he was furious, shouting and screaming. That was his gift to his precious daughter. Precious life. Not much he cared for her. And he raises his fist to Nana Alice. Well, she looks up at him. cold and stared and says, Ned, some people in these parts recognise a witch. So wise men would be careful where they put their hands. And Ned, he trembled and, oh, wait, he did. And stepped back. Fleas, said Nana Alice. Fleas that bring what your Jenny's got. And it's fleas what spread them. I've not seen them colours and them swellings for 60 years. Ned, he's still fuming. He stomped out the door and you could hear him harnessing up the horse, and within minutes you heard the horse and cart disappear down the lane. Alice, she sent for the village people, sent for the wives. She told them, go to stable, clear it out, drag out all the straw, burn it and clean it. And when they'd done that, they stripped poor Jenny off of all her clothes, gave her a good hot bath and wrapped her in a fresh blanket from a neighbour. And Alice took her into the stable and sat with her, told everyone else to disappear. Well, I snuck in because Alice was still my friend. Well, Jenny was still my friend. And Alice sent word for the rest of the house to be cleaned out. All the bedding to be stripped out, everything to be boiled and washed, linen and clothes, and the house scrubbed down with lye. And all the old straw pallets and everything wrapped up the house and burnt with the stable straw. It was a fair old fire they had there that night. Cut through the cold and you could even feel it in the stable. Well, Alice then gave them a bag of her special herbs. Said put them in the fire and lock the cottage up. Oh, special herbs they were indeed, because they stank to high heaven, they did. Well, Alice, she sat in that barn along with poor little Jenny all that night, giving her drops of nightshade for when the poor little mite was writhing about. And I tell you, just before dawn pinked the sky, Alice, she went and cut a lock off of Jenny's hair. I hadn't known when Jenny had stopped breathing, but Alice took that lock and gave it to the women and said, go bake the cake. And they did. Now, some cakes, they turn out brown and crusty, and a few, they turn out black as soot. But young Jenny's, it was white and pure. And Nana, she took that soul cake and took it down to the boundary, and she waited. She waited for Barnabas. Nobody waited for Barnabas. You just put the cake down and wait and went back and he would come. But she waited for him. Now you could have heard Barnabas a mile away, they reckon, a grumbling and muttering. Who on earth would die on a night like this? Drag a poor old man from his bed on a freezing morning like this one. It's not right, it's not. There's plenty of warm days in the summer. Why can't they just die then? But my experience was that Barnabas grumbled about everything, so it didn't really count too much. Well, Alice, she stood there and waited for him. And when he reached her, she didn't offer the cake, she just held it and looked at him and said, little Jenny, she died like my little one. And you could see Barnabas, he started, stepped back a fraction. There was a look of shock on his face. And he stared at us, and I swear there was a tear that crept down his cheek and froze there. And my heart was thumping, it were. Thump, thump, thump. I'm thinking to myself, take the cake, eat the cake. Let her pass on, please. And Barnabas stood still. And he looked at that cake. He looked at how pure and white it were. You don't need much shriving, do she? And I'm thinking, no, take the cake, take the cake. Oh, it must have been a whole minute. We stood there, the three of us, Alice holding the cake, Barnabas staring at it, and me a shivering next to him. And he reached out, and he took that cake, and he ate it there and then. And he turns off, and he stomps back into the night. Well, we buried Jenny that day. Me stood with Meg, his mother, her mother, and holding Meg's hand. No sign of Ned. Nobody saw him for over a month. And Jenny, well, she passed on shriven, didn't she? But that's how it was in them days, before the doctors and the lawyers and the priests. Everyone in the hills went shriven. They all went pure, their cakes eaten, except for two. One of those cakes was soot black, and the other one was pure white, just like Jenny's. But those are tales for another night. The soul cake, Lee's good missus, a soul cake. Flour for the blood, wine, flour for the body, wine for the blood, salt for the keeping, and a heart that shows that you were good.